My drive to where I'm at today is that I've really truly felt in my heart that it is possible that somewhere somebody knew something that could help my daughter. And this door right here represents so many things. And this door represents that door because you guys took that possibility the minute you walk through that door. Because when you walk through that door, you are now surrounded by people that do think outside the box. You are going to listen to so many extraordinary speakers and human beings in the next 3 days that have taken chances with their careers for our children. And these are the doctors that are going to change your life. And not many doctors and therapists and so forth will guarantee you anything, but I guarantee you that you will leave this conference with something that will change your life. It might not be everything that is in this conference, and there's a lot of information that you're going to be bombarded with, but I guarantee you and give you my word that there'll be something that is going to alter your child in some way. And I want to just give you guys a round of applause for taking that and walking through that door and taking that opportunity to help your child in this way. Give yourself a round of applause. Grace really got me to this point, and we named Grace before we ever knew that anything was wrong with Grace, so her name is definitely very fitting to her. And this right here picture I take everywhere with me because it was when Grace was in the hospital and I'd asked about hyperbaric therapy and alternative therapies. I had a physician write me a prescription on a prescription pad that said, feed Grace styrofoam 3 times a day and she will walk. Now, all I ever wanted in my life was my daughter to walk. So for a physician to say that to me and to put it on a prescription pad really made me mad. I was gonna say a different word, but I changed my mind. It really made me mad. And we have that prescription pad up at a hyperbaric center to show parents that even when you are given that type, you need to fight against it. Because in the next room after I left that doctor and my neurologist came into the room and knew that I was wanting to start hyperbarics, she took a pair of keys, shook them, tossed them on a table, and told me that that was my daughter's brain. Now, look at this little girl's picture. Does she look like a girl that is dying, willing to pull life support on her? The state of Wisconsin won the rights to turn my life support off on my daughter on a Wednesday. I took her out of the hospital on a Friday against medical advice. It was a big stink in the state of Wisconsin that I was doing this, and they were going to hold me liable if my daughter died in between Wisconsin and the hyperbaric center that I was going to. So you need to, find that piece of whatever it is, a picture to hold on to, a memory to hold on to, but there's no way that I as a mom was gonna let this little girl die. Look at her. I mean, I'm biased, but she's absolutely beautiful. How I began with this is I did a lot of research, and I talked to other parents, and I talked to physicians, and I hooked up with Moms United for Moral Support. If you don't belong to that network, it's a great network to belong to. It's an organization that was started by a mom that has a child with autism and cerebral palsy. And it just connects you with wonderful parents and physicians, and it's just a great informational bank for you to have. So I decided that I was going to do hyperbaric therapy, but I also decided that if I was going to do this, and I had all these naysayers, that I needed to make sure that I did it in an appropriate way, and I needed to make sure that I was prepared to fight them and tell them that yes, it did work, because I know so many times we try different things with our children, and then we go back to our pediatrician all excited, and they say, oh, well, it could have happened anyway. And we hear that all the time. And after all the efforts that we have done to get them to that point, they can't even acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, the things that we are doing with our kids are actually because of what we're doing with them. So these are some of the things that I recommend. SPECT imaging. Dr. Usler, who's one of the world's leading authorities in that, is actually right here in the front row, and he's going to be roaming around at the IHA booth, so you could talk to him more about it. But it's a scan that shows the flow of oxygen in your child's brain. And I think it's very, very important to have that, especially if you're going to try to fight your insurance companies, because at this time, it's the only scientific tool of measurement that we have. So if it's something that you're looking at doing and fighting your insurance company, I highly recommend getting a SPECT imaging done, and you can talk more to me after my talk about that. Make sure that you get independent PT, OT, and vision, any type of therapy that you're going to. Just make sure you get evaluations. Don't tell them what you're going to do. Just say, could you give me an update on my child, and write a little bit about where he or she happens to be today. Same with teacher evaluations and any other type of testing. With Grace, we did like an EEG, and we did a muscle biopsy because that was what was able to tell the mitochondrial function. At age 3 is when we began our journey with hyperbaric therapy. Grace had a terminal diagnosis. She was blind, had seizures. The feeding tube was placed at 5 months. She was still being fed through a feeding tube. She had apnea, so we were hooked up to machines most of the time, and she couldn't regulate her own temperature, so she had to be kept warm under a heat lamp. So we had a really difficult time giving Grace a lot of closeness and holding her because she was hooked up to so many machines, and so we did a lot of music therapy and different things with her. But Grace, even with that, was not able to hold her head up. She wasn't able to hold anything in her hands, crawl, talk, nothing. And this was at age 3. And at age 3, my daughter still only weighed 8.5 pounds. So she looked more like a 3-month-old than a 3-year-old. After hyperbaric therapy, Grace had tremendous improvements, and my daughter had a lot of deficiencies, so the improvements for my daughter obviously were going to be very, very great. My daughter was considered blind. She had cortical visual impairment. Her vision was completely restored. That was documented not only by Mayo Clinic, but New York Presbyterian, a neuro-ophthalmologist, who told me that Grace would never see in her life, never ride a bike, actually took all that back to me when I took Grace to him, and he said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And now there are some studies being done in the visual field because of Grace's case. She was now seizure-free, and we just even had an EEG done less than 6 months ago, and she still is seizure-free, and she's on absolutely no medications, and she was on 4 different seizure medicines. So it completely restored her from not having seizures. She started to gain weight, and her feeding tube got to be removed. Apnea resolved itself, and the most important gift that I got was that for the first time in my life, I knew what it felt like when Grace said, "Mama." So I understood what it was when Lily said it, but finally, at age 4.5, my daughter looked at me and said, "Mama," and really knew that I was her mom. And all the other stuff aside, that was the greatest gift. And then about a year ago in February, my daughter got out of her beautiful little pink wheelchair, and she has been walking ever since. So she's just been doing incredible. At that point, I was obviously very, very happy with everything going on in Grace's life after 2 years of hyperbaric therapy. But unfortunately, my daughter then got a diagnosis of ASD, and how that happened to us was that we never gave Grace any of her vaccines because of the mitochondrial disorder. And we took her to kindergarten, and my husband and I, being divorced, he took her in there, and they said she doesn't have any of her shots. So he took her to the pediatrician, and less than 5 months later, I didn't hear Mama anymore. And we ended up beginning our journey into the autism community. And I had already been working on stuff in autism with hyperbarics, so we went back to doing full hyperbaric therapy with her for her ASD.